I turned to my wife and I said, that's it. We are never, ever, ever doing network marketing again. And she said, that's it. We're done. We'll figure something else out. 2 weeks later, Tony called me, and here I am, 30 years later, still talking about it. So, but when you start to look at the extent of ACN and the gravity, I mean, I remember getting that phone call from Tony, and he started talking about ACN, and my wife was sitting next to me, and she's like, who's that? I go, it's Tony. She's like, hang up the phone, don't answer him, call block, and I go, he just wants to say hi. Nobody just wants to say hi, And I said, hey, Tony, what do you want? He goes, hey, we're starting up a new company. I got to get into the other room. I went, where are you going? Get back out here. And, he started to talk about ACN. He said, listen, I know that we've been in the industry for a while. I want you to take a look at what we're doing here. It's more based on residual income and services. I'm not going to go through all that. I think you all know the history of it. But I was dealing with products and versus services. So I was intrigued, and it was more aligned with, I guess, my thought process at the time, being in the engineering world. And I just said, well, I've been to meetings and been to trainings. I'm from the Philadelphia area, I'm New Jersey, but right outside Philadelphia. Tony called me. He's from Detroit, Michigan, so 700-800 miles away. And I'm sitting there talking to him on the phone, and my wife's telling me to hang up. And I said, well, listen, what do you want me to do? He said, listen, I just want you to come to a meeting. I go, oh, my God, not the meeting thing again. I said, I know how these things work, right? Every time I say yes, I sign up, right? So I said, well, when's the meeting? He said, he goes, come out this weekend. We're doing something. It was Tuesday. He said, come out on Friday. And I said, well, do you want me to drop everything? This is 1992, 1993. I said, I don't know if I can make it out there. He goes, well, just come out. I said, all right, well, listen, I hung up the phone. My wife said, did you tell him no? I said, no, I'll fly out there Friday. I'll tell him no in person. Now, we were friends, so I knew I was going to have a good time that weekend. I just didn't know what was going to happen. But I got out there that weekend, and we spent the entire weekend kind of looking over the future of ACN, having fun, communicating, talking about what it could be. He introduced me to the other partners. I knew Mike, Tony, and his twin brother, Mike. That's nice to see. 30 years later, they're still twin brothers. They're still together, so that's working out. But the other two partners, Greg Provenzano and Robert Stevanowski, I had no idea who they were. I'd never really met them, didn't have any affiliation with them. These guys were fairly new partners with them as well. So I wanted to kind of get my feet wet, kind of understanding not just the company, but also the philosophy and maybe the other owners as well. So I remember having an opportunity. Tony introduced me to Robert. He said, listen, we're going to leave here. He took me for a tour of the home office. Now, I know a lot of you have had tours of the home office even recently this week. Would you agree we have a pretty nice home office right now? I think we're on 17 acres. We have 150,000 square feet of office space down there. I mean, you drive in, there's flagpoles that are from all the way out in the parking lot. There's a long driveway that takes you right up to the doorway of the world headquarters. I mean, you're taking pictures. There's flags of every single country out front. We keep them updated based upon production and what's happening in each country. I mean, it's really a nice look, But I remember Tony in 1993 said, let me take you for a tour of the home office. It was, outside of Detroit, Michigan. And we walked up the stairs, and we get to this little office suite. He kicks the two doors open from the hallway, and the doors open up, and he goes, there's the tour. We're standing out in the hallway. I go, well, there's the tour. He goes, yeah, you can see it all from here, So maybe it was an 11 or 112 square foot office space. But it was the beginning of what they were going to create, from that to the world headquarters that we have not only in Charlotte, but obviously buildings and facilities all over the world right now. But I looked at the world headquarters back then, and he took me in the back. There was a little office in the back. He said, this is my office, and Tony Cooper's on it. And I said, oh, one little office? You got your own office. This is nice. He said, listen, we're going to go out and meet Robert, and then we'll come back tomorrow. I'll introduce you to Greg. So we went out and we met with Robert Stevanowski. And if you don't know the other co-founders that had an opportunity, Robert was a gentleman. He said, listen, we're going to expand the company, Mike. Glad you're up here this weekend. This is what our goals are. He said, we've got to make money off of this and this. He said, the one thing I can share with you is that we're going to make money off stuff that doesn't even exist today. And that's really our business plan. And I'm thinking, I don't know what you're talking about, right? Because at the time, as Tony mentioned, they started off with long distance, which was picking up the phone, dialing one back then, and making a long distance phone call. You got a little piece of a $10 or $15 phone bill, and that was the extent of the opportunity. And I said, well, Robert, Tony talked to me about telecom. He talked to me about what's happening. You're talking about stuff that doesn't exist. I'm not really sure. I'm not following you. I said, the phone exists. It's on the wall. You pick it up. You make a phone call. He said, well, what we really look at is not what exists. He said, what we realize is that people will always want to communicate. He said, we're just not sure how they're going to communicate in the future. And I said, well, these are young guys. They're all in their 20s. They're just getting involved in this industry. But Robert's brain was completely in a different mode already. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, the phone exists, long distance exists. He said, yes. And he goes, people do pick up the phone. He goes, but there's things that are happening right now. There's transition that's happening. There's car phones. And how many people remember the car phone? Well, some of you are old enough, but people say, what was a car phone? Well, it was a car phone because it weighed 300 pounds, and it was bolted to the chassis of the car, and you needed the car to power it up and move it around. He said, don't look at what it is, look at what it's going to become. He said, it's no longer attached to the house, and I think that's the main thing. He said, now conversations are on the move. And I said, well, that's for rich people and doctors and lawyers and people who can afford that and carry it around. He said, don't look at what it is, look at what it's going to become. And right after that, it became a bag phone. And if you remember the car phone, then you definitely remember the bag phone. The bag phone was really taking a car battery, putting a car battery in a bag, and putting the phone on top of the car battery, and you wrap the entire thing around your neck, and it weighed about 80 pounds, but he said, you're no longer attached to the car. And I said, oh, and he said, there's the industries that we're getting, that we're looking to get going to get involved with. And you look today where we're at with wireless and our flash wireless division, right? And everything you had. We're talking about flash being here and getting SIM cards and the things that you have. I mean, think about it. How many people are pretty attached to your devices nowadays, right? How many people here have? That's a bad question. How many people here don't have a cell phone? Oh my God. Does he have shoes? Right? Would you imagine? Right? Because I'm just kidding, everybody has one. But how did he get here? He drove. How did he drive without his phone, right? Because we cannot imagine not having a phone nowadays, right? I mentioned phone, everybody reached to make sure you still had it, Because every room that we go into the house, the only thing we're looking for when we leave that room is your phone, right? You can't get in your car and go, drive half a block away. I got to turn around. God forbid you're 3 hours away and the phone's at home. You still turn around. I got to go back, right? But the idea is, Robert didn't necessarily know this, he just knew that what was coming. Communication was changing. And you look at the way we communicate today from 1993, it's a whole lot different, right? If you have kids, my kids don't really communicate with me. I mean, they do, but it's like, hey, when I talk to my son, but he's got Xbox on, he's talking to 55 people on there playing his game, he's got his laptop open, he's doing something over here, he's got his other headpiece, he's got his phone on, and he's talking to everybody but me. I'm like, you want dinner? Can I get you dinner? Can I get you dinner? Then I just text him, and I go, hey, how about some dinner? I put it all caps. He's like, you don't have to yell, But, they're not out giving out phone numbers, kids nowadays. They're giving out snap handles, right? And everything's changing. But you know what? Robert had us, at least our mindsets pre-positioned for this development. And not only here in the U.S., but worldwide, being able to capitalize on that because his thinking is different. He also pushes at a time to get into the energy market, to get with flash, not flash, with Zoom energy. And said, you know what, we can position ourselves, when you start to go out and hit the energy markets. He loves to have a bigger footprint. He said, we're going to go in the US, we're going to become a larger company, we're going to have more, a larger footprint. We're going to give our IBOs as many services as we can possibly give them, and that's what we've been doing over the last 30 years. Same with Mr. Greg Provenzano. Real quickly, Mike and Tony Kupas are master marketers, master trainers. They run everything. When it comes to almost every detail of every training, of every PowerPoint, of every little thing that you see that happens on a video, on an opportunity video, here throughout all of North America, all of Canada, all of Latin America, all the European countries, all of Australia, all of Asia right now, goes through Mike and Tony. Right, where they pinpoint what happens, how to actually present the ACN opportunity, how to train it from the core trainings that we have in the back office. Each particular training is delved into. Master trainers, master marketers, and the other gentleman is Mr. Greg Provenzano, the president of the company. Sometimes you listen to Greg, and I know he might be listening now, I hate to say it, but he could be president of the United States because the way he communicates, and I only say that because of his demeanor. When Greg talks to you, he never talks at you or down to you or over you or, in a way, whether you're talking to Greg one-on-one or you're listening to Greg talk to an entire group of people like this or in an arena where we have 10 or 15 or we've had 20,000 people, Greg walks up to the podium and the entire room goes, because people want to hear what he has to say, and then he starts to talk and you feel like no matter how many people are in that room, he's only talking to you. And I always tell him, I don't know, I know he doesn't do it on purpose, it's just the way that he communicates comes across like that. And he's always been like that. And 30 years ago when I met him, Tony had taken me back into that little office that I talked about earlier, and in the very back there was a little office that used to say Tony Kupas. He says, today we're going to meet Greg. We went back there, and Tony's name had been taken off the door. Greg had put his own name on the door, and today was Greg's office. I go, I thought this was your office. He goes, not today, you know. He knocked on the door, and Greg was sitting there at the desk. All of Tony's stuff was gone. All Greg's pictures were up. Greg goes, welcome to my office. I thought I was here before, right? But as I sat and talked to Greg, and not only his demeanor with the way that he spoke, but the way he talked to me even back then, he made everything seem like it had already happened. I mean, people with vision have an opportunity, have it in their head where not only can they have a vision, but they're able to cast a vision. And Greg started to talk about ACN as if it was where it's at today, back then. And what he said to me, he said, Mike, we're, obviously we're happy to see that you're up here for the weekend, blah, blah, blah. I hope you're having a good time. You understand the company. I go, Greg, this is pretty exciting. I go, great to finally get a chance to meet with you. What's the future? He said, listen, let me tell you something, Mike. And he's sitting at this little rickety desk. The office was pretty much brand new. There wasn't like brand new furniture or anything like that. They were all sharing this little tiny desk. And as he's sitting there at that little desk, he got so excited about ACN. He's like, let me tell you what, Mike, we are perfectly positioned. 68 countries around the world are going through deregulation right now. ACN is perfectly positioned for a worldwide opportunity, and this is what we're doing right now. He said and he started talking about billions of dollars. He said $60 billion or $100 billion is up for grabs, and ACN is in the middle of everything that's going on. And I'm sitting there going like this, and he kept talking about how big and this, ACN this, and worldwide this, and I'm looking and I go, oh my God, like I go, Greg, calm down. Tony invited me up here Tuesday, it's Friday, I don't know what's going on. I go, worldwide, and behind Greg there was a map on the wall, a laminated map. Did you ever see those laminated maps? And in the laminated map of the US, there was one little tiny pin in Detroit, Michigan. And it had like a little red tip or a little red flag on it. And I go, oh my God, Greg, this is unbelievable. You moved your head, I see the map, and I see the flag in the map, the pin in Detroit, Michigan. He turns around and he said, Detroit, Michigan. World headquarters. I go, this is unbelievable. 68 countries. I go, where else are you? And he said, well, where are you from? I said, well, I'm from Philadelphia. He said, when are you leaving? I said, I'm leaving tomorrow. He reached down, he pulled a little drawer out, he pulled out a little pin. He goes, tomorrow, we'll be in Philadelphia. And to see, I didn't know how to say, I'm not in yet. I'm not, Do you know what? I flew home, the next day. My wife picked me up at the airport. I have an ACN hat on. I've got a T-shirt down here that says ACN. I'm carrying boxes of ACN stuff. She said, did you sign up? I go, I don't know. I think so. I think they got me. I go, get me home. She said, what's going on? I go, I don't know, but I think I'm international expansion. So she said, who told you that? I go, the president, whoever he is, right? But, when I think back, everything that Greg talked about came true. Everything he talked about in that conversation came true. We started putting pins across the map. I started to take ownership of it. And he cast something inside of myself at the time that allowed me to think that that's what they were going to do it with or without me. He wasn't saying, if you go back and help us, this is what's going to happen. He was talking about 68 countries before we had jumped out of the little 1,200 square foot office in Detroit. Right? And we started popping pins all across the country, and then we popped our first international pin up into Canada. A little bit after that, we started popping pins in Europe and went through 23, 24 countries throughout Europe. We jumped over into Australia, New Zealand. We jumped over into South Korea. We jumped into Japan. Came back here, jumped down into Latin America and Mexico. We expanded onto another continent. And we started to grow down to the South American marketplace. So you can see what's happening right now, and we're still positioned where the growth is going to continue. So if you look at all the stuff that I'm just talking about, you think, what did we just do this week? We're going to explode what's going to happen over the next couple of years. What do you think these co-founders can do with 30 years of experience when before what they did, look what they did with no experience to get us to this particular point. Now we've got some of the best speakers, best trainers. The co-founders are as committed today as they were back then. They're as committed with the knowledge and the information they need to kind of go out and grow the business. But it all comes back to all of you. The opportunity would be nothing without everyone being here today to learn how this business operates.